Hello, my name is Maynard Warren. Thank you for listening to this audio. The purpose of this presentation is to provide you with an overview of your SPQ Gold assessment results, the categories, and score interpretations. The SPQ and hopefully this presentation will help you better understand your sales prospecting preferences so that you can discover areas of opportunity for your future improvement. Again, my name is Maynard Warren. I've been working with salespeople for well over 20 years, helping them interpret their SPQ Gold results. Your company had you complete the SPQ Gold. This presentation hopefully will be beneficial for you to get a better handle on what your results actually mean and how they potentially can benefit you. So the slide that you're looking at right now is a sample summary report. When you get your profile results, you'll find that this will be the last page. Typically, the profile results are perhaps 10 or 11 pages. Normally, the summary report is going to be your last page. When you look at the summary report, you'll notice green, yellow, and red. And those are actually colors, just like a traffic light. When someone scores a green in an area, that means that that area is the strength that's propelling them to be successful. When somebody scores a yellow, that means that's a precautionary or an average score. Should be okay, shouldn't be getting in the person's way, but when the salesperson is having a production slowdown, it could be caused by some of these yellow scores. When you score in the red zone for anything in the SPQ, you need to stop and really gain an understanding of what that category is that you just scored red in, because these are things that could be putting an artificially low ceiling on how successful you can be with your prospecting efforts and your selling efforts. So again, the scoring system, the color code's just like a traffic light. As you look at the summary page, what you're going to find is that the SPQ report is in 4 sections, and those sections are printed in light blue along the left-hand column of the summary page, and the first one is Sales Call Reluctance Overview. The one below that, the second section, is Sales Call Reluctance Types. The third section is Sales Call Reluctance Imposters. And then the last section is Attitude toward the Questionnaire. These are actually fudge factor scores to see if you tried to fudge your answers on the questionnaire. So those are the 4 sections to the SPQ. You're going to see a total of 21 measurements or categories in those 4 sections. And then you're going to see colors through the middle of this summary report. Then out to the right, you're actually going to see your score. And your scores will be under where it says raw score. So where it says raw score, those are your scores, 0 to 100. And if I were in your shoes, I wouldn't even worry about the contrast score. I'll tell you what it is. The contrast score is the average score. To me, I think the thing that will be most helpful for you is understanding which color you got in a certain category, and then also what does that category mean? Is it an important category for you to be successful? The remainder of this presentation, that's what I'll focus on, is the categories. And with that being said, let's take a peek first at the top section where it says Sales Call Reluctance Overview, Prospecting Break, Prospecting Accelerator. Prospecting Break is a measurement of how much energy are you potentially wasting due to call reluctance. Okay, so call reluctance, kind of the layman's definition for call reluctance is call reluctance are negative, debilitating thoughts that will cause us at that moment of truth to be inactive. It will cause us to make excuses of why right now is not a good time to call that prospective account. So that's what call reluctance typically does, is it causes us to be invisible, causes us to make excuses. In essence, it causes us to waste energy. That's what the prospecting break score measures, is how much energy is this salesperson wasting due to call reluctance? And then the accelerator is the exact opposite. How much energy is this salesperson using productively to support their career ambition and to set enough sales appointments so they can hit quota or exceed quota? So break is how much energy are we potentially wasting. Accelerator is how much of our motivational energy are we using successfully. Also, the next section down where it says sales call reluctance types, and I'll get into a little bit more in-depth review on the 12 types of call reluctance. Then the third section down, it says sales call reluctance imposters, and what you're going to find are the two most important scores on the entire profile: prospecting motivation and prospecting goals. In fact, I'm going to talk about how important those are. And then the bottom section talks about the fudge factors. Did you try to fudge the assessment? And we'll come back to that a little bit during this presentation. So in looking at this schematic diagram, we're going to see a couple of really important things that we need to know about to be successful in commission sales. The first of which is a big M. We need to have a big M. That's motivation. We need to have a lot of gas in our tank, a lot of juice flowing through our system. Motivation, as we look at it, we measure it, is how much prospecting motivation are you bringing to the job each and every day. And we look at prospecting motivation really divided into two categories: how much physical energy are you bringing to the job, and also how much emotional energy are you bringing to the job. So physical and emotional energy that allows us to have prospecting motivation, that's what that category means. And you're going to see that on your profile results. That's one of the top two most important categories on your profile results. If you score in the yellow or red zone for motivation, prospecting motivation that is, I would recommend that you read a lot about it and maybe take steps to fix it. Goal level over on the right-hand side of this diagram. We look at goals as prospecting goals. Okay, so if you've got ample motivational energy supporting your career, that motivation needs a destination. We need to know, how am I going to use my motivation today? Why is it important for me to make a lot of prospecting contacts today? Why is it important for me to make a lot of sales calls and set a lot of sales appointments today? Typically, people that have more focused prospecting goals are the folks that are going to get more done as far as contacting prospects. They'll set it as a higher priority. So prospecting goals is one of the top two categories on your profile results. M, G, you need to look at your profile. If you're in the yellow or red for either of those, my suggestion is you do some follow-up reading on that. And also my suggestion would be you take some steps to enhance those two things, motivation and goals. But let's assume that you've got ample motivation and you've got focused goals. Then hopefully you're in that number one model, which is most all of your motivation is free-flowingly getting over to support your goals. And that's what that number one model says. It's that motivation is uninterruptedly, free-flowingly getting over into supporting the goals that you've set for yourself. You're taking the appropriate sales actions. You're not making excuses. You're proactive. That's awesome. But what we find in the real world is most salespeople actually fall into this number two diagram. So if you look at the number two diagram, we've introduced a new symbol here. It's that yellow starburst, and it says emotional interference. Well, that's what call reluctance is. Call reluctance is emotional interference that causes your motivational energy to actually be diverted into coping with prospecting and selling. So instead of that energy free-flowingly making it over to support our career and turning into all these great prospecting and sales activities, instead of that occurring, when we have one or more of these 12 types of call reluctance, what actually occurs is we're using a lot of our motivational energy into making excuses why we can't contact a prospect right now. And typically that motivation, instead of making us visible to our prospects, that motivation is going into escape route behaviors, like doing whatever, expense reports, or doing extra Googling of prospects' contact information, or whatever the case may be. Typically, when we suffer from call reluctance, what typically occurs is that motivation that could be going into revenue-generating activities is actually going into escape route behaviors. That's why call reluctance is such a big deal, and why it's so costly for so many salespeople, is because it's actually costing you in lost commission dollars. So hopefully that makes sense. And when you look at your summary page, you're going to find how you scored in prospecting motivation. You're going to find how you scored in prospecting goal level. Also, you're going to find a score that gives you an indication of how much total emotional interference you're predisposed to having, and that's your prospecting break score. That tells you how big your call reluctance barrier is. And then you're also going to see how you fared in the 12 types of call reluctance. In the case of call reluctance, you always want the lower the score, the better. You want your score to be as close to 0 as possible with call reluctance. On the other hand, you want your motivation score to be as close to 100 as possible. You want your goal score to be as close to 100 as possible. Now let's look at the 12 types of call reluctance. We're looking at the 12 types of call reluctance, and if you notice, we've got 7 types that are in bold black print, and then 5 types that are in light print. So let me explain why we've done that. The 7 types that are in darker print are what we call the big types of call reluctance. Those are the major types of call reluctance. They're doomsayer, overpreparer, hyperpro, role rejection, yielder, referral aversion, and oppositional reflex. The reason that those are the big types of call reluctance is because those 7 types not only can have a negative impact on your prospecting levels, but also they can have a negative impact on how you actually conduct sales appointments and walk a prospective account through the sales process. So those are the big 7 types: doomsayer, overpreparer, hyperpro, role rejection, yielder, referral aversion, oppositional reflex. If you score in the yellow or red zone for those 7 types, my suggestion is to do a little bit more reading about these things and then make some determinations on whether you need to fix these things in your behaviors and in your thought processes. The small 5, the little 5, are stage fright, social self-consciousness, separationist, emotionally unemancipated, and telephobia. The reason that we call those the little 5 is because those are very targeted types of call reluctance. For instance, look at telephobia, the last one. Telephobia, when somebody has telephobia call reluctance, it only impacts them when they think about using the phone to initiate prospecting contacts. So it's a very targeted fear. So the top 7 are going to be more costly to a commission salesperson and hold them back even more than the bottom 5. Here's a 1-sentence definition on each of the 12 types of call reluctance. And let's go through those. I'll give a little commentary on each of the 12 types. Doomsayer is a salesperson typically that worries about everything. We don't see many doomsayers in commission sales because think about it. If somebody's a worrier, normally they do not gravitate to commission sales. So chances are you scored in the green there. But if you found yourself scoring in the yellow or red, again, I would read up on it a little bit more on doomsayer and then make a decision on whether this is something that's getting in my way. Overpreparer. We see a lot of those. It's salespeople that overanalyze and they underact. They're always looking for more information, and when most salespeople are on the phone making their prospecting contacts and setting their appointments, overpreparers are still preparing to do those activities. So overpreparing, you get a lot of information, but it takes you so long to pull the trigger and actually get into action that's why that's so costly. Hyperpro is a salesperson that puts way too much of their motivational energy into their image. Sometimes hyperpros are salespeople that will tell themselves, I don't need to prospect. The other guys, the other ladies, they need to do that, not me. I'm a professional. I've been at this for a while. So you know what? I'm just going to build my referral network. Well, okay, that's all well and good if you can do that. But quite oftentimes, hyperpros are putting and investing so much of their motivational energy into supporting their image that they really take their eye off the ball and don't have a lot of prospecting contacts to help them be successful. The next type is stage fright. That's a salesperson that just doesn't feel like they're themselves when they're in front of groups. They feel they freeze up. They feel that they're being judged. So they'll run from those opportunities. They will not seek those out. The next type is role rejection. That's a salesperson that's bought into all the negative stereotypes about, or at least some of the negative stereotypes that we've heard about salespeople. So folks with role rejection will put tons of their motivational energy into deflecting or hiding the fact that they're a salesperson. That's how it's costly for them. Yielder is the next type. That's the most common type. We see the most reds in that category. It's also one of the most costly types. A yielder is a salesperson that avoids conflict. They don't like to close. They don't want to be pushy. They don't want to be forward. Typically, they drag out the sales process where it takes a long time to close a deal, all because they want to be best buddies have tons of rapport with prospective customers, and typically that drags out the sales process. Social self-consciousness is a salesperson that aims at the wrong targets. They're calling on and setting appointments with folks that can support the sale, but typically they're not the decision makers. So folks with social self-consciousness that have a hesitation to contact the C-level, the C-suite. Separationist and unemancipated, unless you're in insurance sales or maybe a stockbroker or sell business to consumer, I wouldn't really worry about these two types. Separationist is a salesperson that doesn't like to network with their friends. Emotionally unemancipated is a salesperson that doesn't like to network with their relatives. Let's go to the last three types. Referral aversion is a salesperson that has a hesitation to ask their happy customers for referrals. There are probably 30 to 40% of salespeople out there that are really scared and anxious about asking their customers for referred leads. That is the most costly of the 12 types. If you scored in the yellow or red zone, I would ask you to strongly consider doing something about that. Telephobia is a salesperson, again, that doesn't like to go make their prospecting contacts on the phone. They feel more comfortable face-to-face. They're perpetually looking for the correct script. They don't feel they can really communicate their message effectively over the phone. Then the last type is oppositional reflex, and that's a salesperson that argues, blames, and criticizes. They always need to be right. So if you scored in the red zone for oppositional reflex, that's really a big deal. And that's what I would share with managers, is when you have salespeople that score in the red zone for oppositional reflex, that's a huge deal. Because typically salespeople that score in the red zone for oppositional reflex have a really hard time taking constructive criticism, and they have a really hard time opening up their mind to letting in new ways of doing things. So again, that's a quick review of the 12 types. I hope that made sense. Now, to conclude my presentation, let's spend a little bit of time talking about how do I make sense out of this profile. I got all these color codes and I've got all these, fancy terms. Now, what do I do with all this? Well, I'm going to try to simplify it for you and break it down into 4 areas that you can look at for your improvement. So maybe the simplest way for us to get this done is look back to the M&G slide that we talked about a few minutes ago. And 3 of the 4 things that you can get focused on for improvement are actually listed right there in that schematic diagram. M, G, and then in the middle, the emotional interference. Let me talk a little bit about each of those 3 things. If you find when you look at your M score, which on your profile is prospecting motivation, if you find that your score is in the yellow or red, my advice would be, first of all, read about it in the Psychology of Call Reluctance textbook. Read about how motivation is constituted by not just physical motivation that you bring to the job, but also emotional motivation that you bring to the job. Read about that. See if you agree with it. And then if you do, you may want to make some changes to help you get more physical energy that you bring to the job each day. And it could be something as simple as finally going on that diet that you've talked about, maybe smoking less, drinking less, getting more sleep, those things that will give us more physical energy. Or it could be lack of emotional energy. Do I really know why I'm doing this job in the first place? Does this job get me excited? Do I have the discipline that I need to do the things to be successful at this job? So you might want to have a little bit of a conversation with yourself to make sure that you've got the appropriate emotional motivational energy. The second thing, also very important, is your G score. That's prospecting goals. Do you have ample goals to support being a superstar salesperson? Do you have enough targets that you're trying to hit? Do you have targets that get you excited? Do you have outcomes that you're looking to achieve on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? If you find your scores in the yellow or red zone for prospecting goal level, then the cure is somewhat simple. If you're in the yellow or red for prospecting goal level, just start by asking yourself, what are my prospecting goals and what are my goals in general? And then write down your answers. Look at your answers, see if they get you fired up. Are you passionate about those things? If you're not, then you're going to need to work on those things and create some things in your work life and your personal life that you're really excited as far as goals that you're looking to achieve. Third thing, right there in the middle of that diagram is emotional interference. And that emotional interference, that's call reluctance. That's that energy, that motivational energy that we're bringing to the job that we're wasting. And the reason we're wasting it is because we think about doing some proactive actions that will help support our sales career, and then we make excuses on why we can't do those things now. We make excuses that may sound like, well, I just called that guy yesterday. I haven't given him enough time to listen and respond to my voicemail, so I'm going to wait another few days to call him. Anyway, that used to be my biggest excuse. Being a yielder myself, that was my biggest yielder excuse. Or it may sound something like this. This client, my boss wants me to ask for referred leads, but, I haven't worked with them long enough. I don't think they've seen the value that I really can bring to their account. So I'm going to wait until, the next time I see this account to actually ask them for a referral. Okay. So that thought right there is going to cause you to be invisible and not take the appropriate sales action. So the best way to really work on call reluctance is to figure out which of the types you want to work on and then look for those in your daily behaviors. And as you look at which of the types you want to work on, I'm going to introduce a new concept that will help you make those decisions. Look back to your summary page and look down at the bottom under attitudes toward the questionnaire and see how you scored on the impression management category. If you scored in the red zone, then what I'm getting ready to say is very important for you. If you scored in the red zone for impression management, we're going to do something a little bit different now. There's a chance you may need to adjust some of your call reluctance scores because of your red impression management score. What your red impression management score actually means is that either consciously or perhaps unconsciously, you fudged a little bit when you completed the SPQ Gold call reluctance assessment. So what we're going to do is, if you have in any of the 12 categories, if you have the highest yellow score that you can have in any of those 12 categories, we're going to go ahead and move those scores into the red zone. There's a chart that will show you what the highest, and we call it a borderline score, what the highest yellow score actually is in each of the 12 types. So if you have a red for impression management, then go ahead and look at that chart, see if you have any of those borderline scores in any of the 12 types. If you do, then go ahead and just consider those particular scores reds versus yellows. Then once you've done that, now let's look at the categories where you scored in the red. As we look at the categories where we scored in the red, I'd go back to the big 7 and little 5 diagram and just ask myself, okay, did I score in the red zone for any of these most important 7 types of call reluctance? And if you did, then I would read in the Psychology of Call Reluctance book about them, and then make a decision on whether I wanted to attack them, to get rid of them. Because, again, what we're trying to do is get rid of the thoughts that cause us to make excuses at that moment of truth, so that we can comfortably take the appropriate proactive prospecting or sales action. So, again, that's what I would do. I'd first go to the big 7, see if any of those pop out off the page that I need to work on. Then I'd scan down at the little 5 and see if I scored in the red zone there. Make my decision, since it's my career, make my decision on whether I want to work on those. Okay. Now, the fourth thing that perhaps you would want to work on is if you scored in the red zone for goal diffusion. If you scored in the red zone for goal diffusion, that means that in all likelihood you're setting way too many daily goals, and not just professionally but also personally. You're trying to do way too much with the limited resource of energy that you're bringing to your job, to your life every day. You're trying to do way too much. So if you're suffering from prospecting goal diffusion, the simplest cure is to make sure that you put prospecting for new business on your calendar each day that you need to do it, whether it's once a week, 3 times a week, 5 times a week. You put it on your daily calendar, and then honor that time that you blocked off. That's the easiest way to fix it. You can actually go another step further if you want and start to eliminate some of the things that you put your energy into each day, professionally and personally, that you really don't have to put your energy into. That's another way to make sure that you can stay on track and keep sane and not be totally stressed out every day. And to conclude my presentation for you folks, let me just share with you, if you have any questions, please contact me or contact my partner, Dan Robinson. Thank you for listening to this, and I hope you're tremendously successful in your job. Take care.